Never thought much of my stepfather, not in a bad way, but he was always so distant and focused on his life when he married my dad. I didn't expect us to become close. He was this poised, handsome man who seemed to always have it all together. I admired him from afar, respecting his boundaries and giving him space. But as time went on, something strange started to change between us. I found myself observing him more. No. Noticing things I hadn't before. One day I came back home earlier than usual. Dad was out of town for the weekend, and the house felt eerily quiet. I wandered through the house, not really expecting to find anyone, until I heard faint noises coming from the stables out back. My stepfather loved horses, and he spent hours with his favorite M. I wasn't sure what he was doing, so curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly made my way toward the stable. As I approached, I saw him standing there, gently running his fingers down the horse's side, his touch tender and soft. The way he looked at the horse was unlike anything I'd seen before. There was this calmness in him, but also something else, something deeper. I leaned against the stable wall, watching him from a distance, mesmerized by the connection he seemed to share with the horse. His hand moved in slow, rhythmic strokes, his fingers tracing patterns along the horse's coat. His body swayed slightly with each breath. He didn't know I was there, but I couldn't pull my eyes away from him. His hair fell around his face, framing his features, and the way he moved, it was hypnotic. There was something so intimate about the way he touched the horse, like he was lost in his own world, unaware of anything else. I found myself growing more and more captivated by him, unable to shake the strange feeling building inside me. I must have made a noise because he suddenly looked up, his eyes locking onto mine for a moment. We just stared at each other, neither of us saying a word. There was a strange tension in the air, something unspoken between us. I felt my heart racing, unsure of what to do next. But then he smiled softly, and something about that smile made the tension ease. "Didn't know you were home?" he said, his voice smooth and calm. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just got back." He walked toward me, his hands still resting on the horse, his eyes never leaving mine. There was something different about him today, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. He seemed warmer, more open, like the usual distance between us had disappeared as he stood closer. I could feel the warmth of his body, the scent of his cologne mixing with the earthy smell of the stable. "You like horses?" he asked, his voice soft. "I guess never really thought about it," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a step closer, reaching out and taking my hand, guiding it to the horse's neck. "Feel that," he whispered. "How strong and calm they are. It's like they understand you without saying word." His hand rested over mine, his touch light, but firm. The way he spoke, the way he looked at me. It was so intimate, our hands pressed together against the horse's soft coat. I could feel the heat from his body, the soft brush of his hair against my arm. And it was doing things to me I didn't understand. His eyes met mine again, and for a moment everything else faded away. There was only him standing so close, his hands still on mine, his lips parted slightly as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The air between us was thick with tension, but not the uncomfortable kind. It was the kind that made my skin tingle, my heart race, the kind that made me want to lean in closer, to touch him, to feel more. We stood like that for what felt like forever, neither of us moving. Both of us, caught in this strange electric moment. Then, without warning, he took a step back, his eyes lingering on mine for a split second before he turned away. I felt the absence of his warmth immediately, and it left me feeling empty. "You should come out here more often," he said, his voice barely audible as he moved back to the horse, his hands once again stroking its mane. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process what had just happened between us. But I knew one thing: I wanted more. I wanted to feel his touch again, to stand that close to him, to be lost in that moment with him. I couldn't shake the feeling, couldn't get him out of my head. The days that followed were torture, every time I saw him. Every time we passed each other in the house, there was this unspoken thing between us. We never talked about that moment in the stable. But it was always there, hanging in the air between us like a secret. Only we knew. And the more time passed, the more I found myself drawn to him, craving his attention, his touch, his presence, that he started spending more time in the stables. And I found myself joining him more often. At first, we didn't say much. Just worked side by side, brushing the horses, feeding them, cleaning the stalls. But the silence wasn't awkward. It was charged with something more every time our hands brushed, every time our eyes met. That same tension returned stronger than before one evening, as the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden light over the stable. He turned to me, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. He stepped closer, his hand resting on my arm, his fingers trailing down to my hand. "You're different," he whispered, his voice low and husky. "I see it in the way you look at me." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "I don't know what you mean." I lied, though. We both knew the truth. He smiled softly, that same knowing smile he'd given me in the stable the first time. "You know exactly what I mean," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And then, without warning, he leaned in, his lips brushing against mine so lightly. I almost thought I'd imagined it. But the sensation was real, and it sent a shock wave through my body. My heart raced. My breath caught in my throat, and before I knew it, I was kissing him back. My hands finding their way to his waist, pulling him closer. Time seemed to slow down as we stood there, lost in each other, the world around us fading away. His lips were soft and warm, his touch sending sparks through me with every movement. It felt like I'd been waiting for this moment forever. Like everything had been leading up to this. We finally pulled away. Both of us, breathless, caught in the afterglow of the kiss. Neither of us said a word, but we didn't need to. Everything we felt, everything we wanted was in that kiss, in the way our bodies pressed against each other, in the way our breaths mingled in the cool evening air. I didn't know where this would go, didn't know what it meant for us, but in that moment I didn't care. All I knew was that I wanted more of him, more of these moments, more of this connection we shared as we stood there, our breaths mingling in the cool evening air. Something shifted between us. The tension that had been building for so long finally broke, and we both knew there was no going back. He looked up at me with those eyes so full of warmth and something deeper, something more intimate. His hand gently squeezed mine, a silent invitation, and I didn't hesitate. I took his hand in mine, leading him out of the stable and back toward the house. Inside, the air felt different, charged with something electric. The quiet of the evening wrapped around us as we moved through the house together, our steps slow, deliberate. Every moment felt heightened, every glance, every touch sending sparks between us. We didn't say a word, but we didn't need to. There was this unspoken understanding between us now, a connection that had grown beyond what either of us could control. Once we reached the living room, he turned to me, his fingers tracing the outline of my jaw, his touch soft but full of intent. I pulled him closer, my arms wrapping around his waist, our bodies pressing together in a way that felt natural, like this was always meant to happen. He let out a soft sigh as I leaned in, brushing my lips against his. Once more, the kiss slow and tender at first, then deepening as the need between us grew. We moved together, our hands exploring each other's bodies, learning every curve, every line, every inch of skin. There was something so intoxicating about the way he responded to my touch, the way his body seemed to melt into mine. It wasn't just physical. There was something deeper, something that made every moment feel intimate, connected. He took my hand and led me to the couch, sitting down beside me. His legs curled up beneath him. He leaned into me, resting his head on my shoulder as I wrapped my arm around him, pulling him close. We sat like that for a while, the quiet of the room enveloping us as we held each other content, in the simplicity of being together. It was the kind of moment that didn't need words. The kind of moment where just being close was enough. After a while, he tilted his head up to look at me, his fingers tracing a light pattern along my arm. "This feels right," he whispered, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I nodded, brushing a strand of hair away from his face. "It does," I agreed, my voice barely above a whisper. There was something so intimate in the way he looked at me, like he was seeing right through me into parts of myself I didn't even realize. We kissed again, slower this time, savoring the moment, taking our time. There was no rush, no need to hurry. We had all the time in the world, and we intended to use every second of it. His lips were soft and sweet as we explored each other with a kind of tenderness I hadn't expected. It was as if every kiss, every touch was a promise, a silent declaration of everything we felt, but hadn't said. Eventually, we found our way to his bedroom. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, casting warm golden light across the bed. He stood by the door for a moment, watching me, his eyes full of desire, but also something more: trust, vulnerability. I crossed the room to him, taking his face in my hands and kissing him deeply, passionately, letting him know with every touch how much I wanted him, how much this meant to me. We moved to the bed, our bodies coming together in a slow, deliberate dance, each touch, each kiss more intimate than the last. The world outside disappeared as we lost ourselves in each other, our connection growing deeper with every moment we spent together. There was something so raw, so real about the way we moved together, like we were learning each other in a way that went beyond the physical, like we were discovering parts of ourselves in each other afterward. We lay there together, our bodies entwined, his head resting on my chest as I stroked his hair. The silence between us was comfortable, full of the kind of quiet that only comes from truly understanding one another. I could feel his breathing slow as he relaxed against me, his body warm and soft in my arms. It felt right, natural, like this was where we were always meant to end up. He looked up at me after a while, his fingers tracing light circles on my chest. "I've never felt this way before," he admitted softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not with anyone." I smiled down at him, brushing a kiss across his forehead. "Me neither," I whispered back. "But I'm glad it's with you." We spent the rest of the evening wrapped up in each other, talking, laughing, kissing, exploring every inch of each other's bodies, like we couldn't get enough. It was as if the rest of the world had faded away, leaving just the two of us lost in our own little bubble of warmth and connection. In the days that followed, things between us only grew more intense. We started spending more time together, finding excuses to touch, to kiss, to be close. We became inseparable, finding comfort in each other's arms, finding joy in the simplest moments, whether it was cooking together, sitting on the couch, watching a movie, or just walking through the house hand in hand. We acted like a couple, in every sense of the word, and it felt natural, like this was how things were always meant to be. We shared everything, the laugh after the secrets, the quiet moments that felt more intimate than words could ever express. Every day brought something new, a deeper connection, a stronger bond. We didn't talk about what we were, didn't put a label on it, but we didn't need to. We both knew what this was, what it meant. And the more time we spent together, the more I realized how much I wanted this, how much I wanted him. He wasn't just my stepdad anymore. He was the man, cared about, the man I wanted to be with, the man who had somehow become the most important person in my life. There was no denying it. We were a couple in every sense of the word, and I wouldn't have it any other way. As the days turned into weeks, our relationship grew more intense, and the lines between what we were and what we used to be blurred completely. We moved in sync, understanding each other without needing words, finding comfort in the stolen glances, the brief touches. But there was always this lingering hunger between us, a need that had only deepened with time. We couldn't get enough of each other, and every moment we were apart felt like a lifetime. One evening we found ourselves alone in the house again, the air between us thick with anticipation. He stood in front of me, his eyes locking with mine, and without a word he took my hand, leading me upstairs to his room. The door clicked shut behind us, and the tension in the air became palpable. I could feel my breathing quickening as he stepped closer, his fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, his touch sending sparks through my entire body. He leaned in slowly, his lips barely brushing against mine, teasing, drawing me in with every breath. My hands found their way to his waist, pulling him closer until there was no space between us. Our bodies pressed together as we kissed with a kind of urgency we hadn't allowed ourselves before. Every touch, every kiss felt more intense, more meaningful, as if we were pouring everything we had into this moment, letting it build to something unstoppable. He whispered my name, his voice full of desire, and in that moment, it was like the world outside ceased to exist. There was only him, only us. Tangled together in a whirlwind of passion and longing that had been building for so long, his hands roamed my body, tracing every inch of my skin while my own explored his, memorizing every curve, every delicate line. It was overwhelming, the intensity of it all. But I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop as we moved together. Our connection deepened, becoming something more than just physical. It was as if we were merging our souls, entwined in a way that made it impossible to tell where one of us ended and the other began. The intensity between us grew, until it was almost too much to bear. And as we reached the climax of our desire, it felt like everything else in the world faded away, leaving just the two of us lost in each other. In a moment that would linger long after the night had ended,